Thanks for joining us on Forging the Future as we take the podcast on the road to Austin, Texas for South by Southwest 2023. As a sponsor for the Houston House, alongside Greater Houston Partnership, I had the chance to talk to a dynamic group of investors, founders, and contributors to the startup ecosystem. This episode, we're talking about startup ecosystems, the challenges, the opportunities, and forging the future for founders. Let's jump right in. Murat, thanks for joining me today. And you are the Director of Innovation for Houston Methodist.
Yeah, very nice to be here.
Yeah, a lot of innovation going on in the medtech space, I gather. And you're here at South by.
Yeah.
And are you here? Why are you here?
It is so we really believe in the cross-pollination of ideas. Mm-hmm. So not just taking things from healthcare, not just taking things from medicine, but learning from other industries, other environments as well. So South by presents one of those opportunities. It's probably one of the best opportunities to learn from others. So that's why I'm here today.
And you're on a panel today?
I am on a panel today.
What is that topic about?
We're going to talk about AI and how it's going to change the world.
Oh, nice. Okay. And then at Houston Methodist, what does the Director of Innovation do there?
So I do two things primarily. So we have this large, innovation, one thing we say, and sorry if it's going to sound like a tagline, but that's actually true. Innovation is in our DNA. It's one of our unparalleled vision. So we try to be unparalleled, but it takes many forms, right? Because when you think about a hospital providing innovation, the first thing that comes to your mind is drugs and therapies, surgeries. But the world is increasingly becoming more digital. So as the Director of Innovation, I'm responsible for digital innovation, managing that portfolio, expanding that portfolio for our customers. And the way that we define customers is our patients as well as our employees, right? Internal customers as well. So my role is to push forward that agenda with innovation within digital.
Interesting. And are you looking within the Houston ecosystem in order to do that, or how do you approach it?
We look nationally and sometimes even internationally, although the success with international projects is not as good as national projects, right? But we rely a lot on the expertise also within Houston as well. So,
is there a favorite technology or innovation that you've seen in the last year or two that you're passionate about?
Right now, we're focusing a lot on using computer vision for operational and safety monitoring. So if I have to give you an example, we're watching the patient room and see if there's a fall risk. If the hand hygiene being compliant to, is there a fall risk in the room? Is the room wet? Using computer vision for that. Also, we're doing the same thing for the operating room as well. We believe that they are not just incremental increases. They're actually transformative, and we try to be very careful when we say transformative. Those is that using computer vision is one of the things that right now I'm most passionate about and consumes most of my time, if I'm being honest.
That's interesting. So it's about using the technology to proactively prevent falls or accidents or problems with compliance.
Exactly.
And then the operating room, what specifically maybe are you doing there?
In an operating room, not to get too technical, I'm not a clinician, so even if I wanted, I couldn't get technical, but before the operation starts, everybody looks at the times. They note the timestamp if possible. At that point, they jot it down. They note it in the computer. But then there's always these timestamps that needs to be abided by. And also when the room is empty, somebody needs to say the room is empty. So instead of relying on humans, because we want to take those monotonous, repetitive tasks out of the equation. Because what you're doing best, if you were a provider, if you were a doctor, you're great at taking care of patients, not documenting, right? So if I take that burden off you, I'm going to put the timestamps by watching the room. I'm going to say when the room is empty just by looking at what's going on in the room. That's what we're doing in there. And we also think that that's going to be one of the other transformative efforts within that computer vision umbrella.
Well, we've had several startups come through our venture studio focused on medtech.
Yeah.
One, for example, measures, they figured out how to measure blood glucose with light, which is a pretty interesting application. They were coming up from Latin America. We had another one who was using augmented reality glasses, because you need to have a representative of the transplant device in the room when you're doing the surgery. And they had the similar problem with COVID, where you couldn't have a physical person there or get someone there to be in the room. And so doing it virtually with augmented reality glasses. And another application that looks pretty big is being able to multiply the impact a single nurse can have on congestive heart patients and monitoring them and being, again, proactive and kind of heading off the readmissions into the hospital. Do you think Houston has grown as an innovation center for medtech in general? Has that been accelerating, or is it, what's your opinion?
I think that's been accelerating over the years. And I mean, Texas Medical Center is world's largest, most dense medical center. Like, there are others that have been either around the country or across the world that we're trying to replicate that model, but it has grown organically, right? So yeah, Houston has been growing a lot, but the companies, startups that come from Houston should have Houston stakeholders as their basically brain trust, but they should target the larger national market as well. So, but from that sense, I think Houston market has been growing. We have all the makings or all the ingredients for a great startup ecosystem, I think.
So if I was a medtech startup in Houston and I wanted to connect to Houston Methodist or some other areas in the Houston medical ecosystem, I mean, are there ways to do that, or are there areas we need to work on there?
We have what we call a steering committee, right? So all of those names are actually on our website.
Okay.
Their LinkedIn's are there. They can always.
So I can look up the steering committee.
Yeah, you can look up the steering committee. You can also send us a note. But there's also events now happening around Houston, like Pumps and Pipes. There's a new building that we're going into. It's called Ion. There was an old Sears building there.
Yeah. So you're gonna have a presence at the Ion?
Yeah, we're going to have a presence at the Ion.
Interesting.
So it's to open ourselves up more for engaging with startups, because as I said earlier, we're also learning as an institution how to work with startups as well, right? So that's we're a large institution. Trying to work with a startup doesn't always, like, sometimes when it works, it's great. It's like great chemistry, but sometimes there's rough edges that needs to be figured out. So we hope to do that more at places like Ion.
Nice. Yeah, we work a lot with Jan Odegaard and Joey Sanchez at the Ion. We do quite a bit of events down there, so I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, that will be great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on.
No, a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Hey, Natalie.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today. We've known each other for quite a while. First time you've been on the podcast, and we were just talking earlier how InnovationMap is really at the forefront of covering the innovation in Houston, right? You've done 176 podcasts yourself, and you just said you have over 3,000 bylines.
Yeah,
right?
over 3,000 articles on InnovationMap, and I'm by far the majority of that. But
almost single-handedly, right? Writing these stories and supporting the Houston ecosystem. So we're talking about innovation and how Houston is coming up as a tech hub, right? And if anybody has their finger on the pulse of what's happening in Houston and what has happened over the last couple of years, I think it's you. You talk to a lot of startups, a lot of founders, a lot of people in the ecosystem. And you're here. You just did a panel at South by. So, any thoughts about how Houston has changed over the last couple of years as far as startups and ecosystem?
Yeah. The change has been pretty significant. I'm an interesting observer, I feel, and also a player, which is very interesting. As a journalist, I feel like you're usually kind of on the outskirts, reporting on whatever you're reporting on. It's obviously media has a role in everything, like every industry. But I think when it comes to being the only entity to cover an ecosystem and industry in Houston, if we're considering tech broadly an industry. Yeah, it was kind of long overdue to have that. And just by the creation of that, it kind of had a ripple effect in a way, which I wasn't prepared for, but it's very cool to see. Like, I didn't get into journalism to like have a big impact on a business community, but it's kind of cool to see. It's a nice side reward. So yeah, I think a lot has changed since InnovationMap launched in November of 2018.
Okay.
So coming up on 5 years this November, which is kind of crazy to think about. And just in that time, like from day one, I felt like my challenge was really tapping into the ecosystem. But I knew at my core that there's endless opportunities for coverage. Like there's tons of innovation and tech and startups happening in Houston, but they were kind of happening in silos. And something I wanted to do was kind of break down some of those barriers and kind of better tell these startup stories. And now I knew at the time, like, even though I couldn't necessarily tap into everything right away, I knew there were these endless stories. And so I like to say that my problem, like my struggle day one of InnovationMap is the same that I have today. There's just so many opportunities for stories. And so what I'm trying to do is be kind of the door to these stories and kind of like give a platform to some of these companies and businesses. So it's only gotten more and more news that I could cover. Like at any day I could cover X amount of stories, but I'm going to focus on 3.
Right.
Yes.
Well, 5 years ago, I imagine there just really wasn't much. I mean, what kind of inspired InnovationMap to start at that point?
Yeah. Well, I think that Houston, and this is obviously before InnovationMap, before even me covering tech and innovation, I think there were some false starts in Houston's innovation ecosystem from what I've observed and people have told me. And so there was some early momentum with the, Houston Technology Center, and there were some other kind of opportunities and there was other accelerator programs that started in Houston that then shut down or kind of evolved. So I think what happened in just like 2017 and then into 2018, there was just more conviction from the city and like more citywide resources being dedicated to creating this tech community. I think that came out of a need to diversify our economy in Houston. So lots of different moving parts to that. I will not pretend to be an expert on that. But in 2017 and 2018, you really saw this like groundswell of support. And I felt late to the party in October 2018. So
Really?
When I like kind of joined and started fleshing out the idea for InnovationMap. So I felt a little late to the party. Like I was raring to go. There was tons of stuff happening. And it was just, like I said, the challenge was like figuring it out and breaking down some of the walls.
Was InnovationMap your idea?
No.
Okay.
I know, I can't take credit for that. So the InnovationMap is owned by Gow Media, which owns Culture Map, radio station. So it's a very diversified media organization that just saw this opportunity, saw people wanting this to exist, people wanting to put their money into it existing. And so really took that opportunity. So I previously was more generalist in the business journalism community. And so it was nice to like narrow down and focus on tech and startups, and also be online only, which provides like a lot of opportunities for quick stories and comprehensive stories and getting people the news they need like into their inboxes, onto Twitter, etc. So yeah, it wasn't my idea, but I was hired on to basically, hey, we want to do this online media platform focused on startups. And I sat down and was like, okay, so this is what we'll cover. This is what the stories will look like. This is, we had our content management system set up, and we like I helped ideate what it would look like and what's the core coverage angle, etc.
So 5 years ago is more about just a couple of startup development organizations and kind of an infancy in the startup ecosystem, but you also felt like you had missed it. Was there something there that was happening that you felt was like a momentum that you had missed?
I think I wouldn't be confident in these dates, but I think like Houston Exponential was established in 2017. I think the HX Venture Fund was 2018. So both of those things were like these city kind of backed organizations to emerge. So I think that there was a lot of momentum in that. And I think it was maybe end of 2018, beginning of 2019, where the plans for the Ion, the Canon, all of those were just plans. And so, yeah, like I don't think I missed those. I think, but that it was very much at the same time. And so I think it was very interesting to see. And Station Houston was already, up and operating for years before that. So there's that element, and they were growing and expanding, and obviously had a future of evolution to come too. So
I remember feeling similarly back in the 80s, thinking I had missed the PC revolution.
yeah,
Right when Microsoft was going public and stuff like this. And so I get the feeling at the time. Of course, looking back, I mean, so much has happened since then, right?
Yeah.
And you've been able to really help document all of that activity. You hosted a panel today. What was the topic?
It was called Demystifying the Startup Journey.
Okay.
So very broad, but I had 3 startup founders kind of in different stages of their startup journey. And so it was really a good look at, how each of them approached funding, how each of them, the pivots they had for their technology. They were all software startups, which was interesting, but they were all in different industries, completely different industries. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially even in our studio, we've seen that, where they're 45-year-old founders who have either taken a company public before and done a startup, or they're coming out of an industry where they've maybe been responsible for a couple $100 million division of a large company, and they have an idea and they want to come out and they want to do the startup. And so we have that. And I think that also we're starting to fill the top of the funnel of new entrepreneurs because of the places like the U of H undergrad program for entrepreneurship being #1, and Rice University having the #1 graduate entrepreneurship program. I heard recently that Houston also has the a #1 high school level or vocational level. I need to find out what the exact stat is on that. But pretty interesting that the city has the #1 undergrad and graduate level entrepreneurship program here, which I think will fill that funnel and maybe have some new and burgeoning, entrepreneurs that aren't just second-time founders.
I think when you think about what makes a successful tech and startup ecosystem, I ask this question a lot to people, what do you as a founder, as a investor, or whatever role they play in the ecosystem, what does Houston still need? What box do we still need to check? And I get every sort of response, and sometimes it's talent, but also then some people will be like, that's the best part about Houston is we have all of this talent from industry. So I think there's the translation of these people working at these major companies transitioning into being interested in working at a startup. That's happening now more and more. And then I think ultimately an indicator of success is exits. We maybe don't have as many as other ecosystems. And so having more of those, or even just a couple big ones that kind of shine the spotlight on what's happening in Houston, what can happen in Houston, is really important. And then the thing that I think a lot of people default the answer to is just more VC money. And I think you're hearing it more and more, and well, there's money in Houston. So it's that same thing of the talent. There's talent in Houston, there's money in Houston, but how do we translate that into being advantageous for Houston's tech ecosystem?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Well, thanks for coming on and filling us in. And
awesome. Thanks.
Okay, I'm here with Paul O'Brien from MediaTek Ventures. Paul,
Good to see you, Chris.
thanks for coming by.
How you doing?
Good to see you again.
We're in Austin at South by Southwest. Are you surviving well?
We are. It's although we've been around Houston House and this whole area, it feels like I'm in Houston.
It does.
They're all the usual suspects.
That's probably not what we want to have happen, right? Austin's Austin, Houston's Houston. The distinctions are attractive and appealing to people these days.
That's true. But that said, you came to Houston recently with what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about that and why.
Why Houston?
Yeah.
We work with burgeoning startup communities to help develop them into much bigger, innovative cities and help move venture capital into the entrepreneurs' pockets. And Houston, I moved to Austin about 13 years ago out of Silicon Valley. I had no reason to move to Austin. It wasn't the hot spot that it is today. I had no reason to move to Austin other than that I loved it. And now that we've developed Austin rather substantially in that regard, we're looking to the future. We're looking for the fact that in every state, different cities play different substantial roles in innovation. And I think Houston's the next hotspot as far as Texas is concerned, probably arguably the next hotspot as far as the country is concerned. If we simply appreciate the fact that Houston and San Antonio and Austin are all within a couple of hours with each other, this is the region to be in.
Exactly. And what is it exactly you're doing in Houston?
So we do two things. We do what's considered venture development. We do a lot of work with economic development offices, with the city, with interested investors or companies in our industry. Our industry is media technology for the most part, in order to mature that side of the ecosystem. And then as a part of that, we drop in an incubator. We drop in a 3-month program that's incredibly rigorous by design. It's pre-seed. We're in the teaching business rather than the accelerator business. And so we work with founders to teach them how to develop a startup from idea to incorporation in about 13 weeks, and focus on the media industry in particular, so that the ecosystem there has much more sophistication of mentorship and venture capital with regard to the news business, the podcasting business, how social media works, how advertising works, because it's that industry in particular that helps everything else thrive. They're the informers, they're the communicators, they're the branding folks who help develop Houston into what it's developing into be.
If I'm a startup in Houston and I'm a media startup, I guess, how do I approach you, or what's the selection process like for you?
No, in fact, we don't have a selection process.
Okay.
That's an important distinction in my use of the word incubator versus accelerator. We don't pick who can and can't learn how to be an entrepreneur. We don't discern what startup might or might not succeed.
Okay.
We take on everybody. Whoever has an idea in the media business is welcome to come join us. And not just the ideas and the entrepreneurs, but we do the same with mentors. If you want to mentor in media innovation in Houston, call us, come join us. If you invest in the space, obviously there's room to get involved in some way. And I think that's a critical piece of developing an innovative ecosystem. I think that's part of why Houston's maturing so much and so quickly next, because you have these hubs for innovation there, and you're starting to develop more programs like yours, like mine, and that's the catalyst that fuels the economy. That's what gives the entrepreneurs the experience and the connections and the network and some perspective to not make mistakes, so that they're far more likely to be successful and have an impact.
So how many startups are in this cohort then in Houston?
We're just doing 12 in Houston this time.
Okay.
We've been running these programs for 6 or 7 years now throughout the country. We're still at the phase of we're trying to figure out whether substantially larger or quite a bit smaller is effective. So 12, 13 seems to be the right sweet spot for us.
That's a magic number.
It's the magic number, but it's the magic number because then what we also do is everyone else on the team is welcome because we're teaching.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's for the founder. If you've got a co-founder, if you've got a CTO, bring them all along, and we end up filling up the room with about 20 to 25 people anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we went through a similar process in the last year, right? So we had 5 in our first cohort. I think we had 21 in the last one.
Yeah.
In the current cohort, we have about 15. And
Yep.
trying to target in on that, like you said, you want enough of them so that they collaborate and can learn from each other, and but not too many to where you're maybe cutting down on the quality of the program.
Well, you could be cutting down on the quality of the program, but what we found, we're in the same vein of what people might consider more sector specific programs, and Techstars is generic. It's for everybody, and Generator is for everybody, and Mass Challenge is for everybody. In those environments, when you get too many people, you start to dilute the experience because everybody's working on different things. But in our case, everyone is in the media business in some way, and that's a broad context too. That's everything from music to advertising to news. We take it all, but there is a shared affinity in that. If you're in the advertising business, the music tech needs to understand how that works, and if you're in the news business, they're trying to figure out how to take advantage of things like video games and social media. So we end up with this nice community that seems to support bigger. But when we start, as we are in Houston, we like to start right in that middle range of 10 to 15, just to get a sense for how it's going to work and whether or not we can scale it up or we want to scale it down a little bit.
So is there, at the end of the program, are there like demo days, like a studio or accelerator normally, or how does it work once they graduate?
Yeah, great question. Because it's not like a startup studio or accelerator. We don't demo in the sense of let's get you in front of a lot of VCs, because this is a 3-month-old company in most cases.
Okay.
And they're still pretty pre-seed anyway. You know, some might have started before they join us, but the fact is they're probably still 6 or 8 months away from meaningfully being able to raise capital.
So you're really early in this process, and these are really infant companies.
On purpose. Well, and again, we like to think of them instead as founders. We're not in the startup business so much as we're in the entrepreneur business. We want to teach people how this works. And so we do have more of a graduation. Bring your family. We bring all the companies that are in the ecosystem. We have all of our mentors there. And we do, of course, invite the VCs as well. They pitch. They do pitch. They demo. But we don't do anything so elaborate as get on stage and let's see if we can get you a check when you're 3 weeks into the start of your company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Houston could use a lot more in the media space. There's not a lot of people there other than like Natalie with InnovationMap and some of the other organizations promoting the ecosystem.
As part of the ecosystem, yes. But one of the reasons that Houston is attracting so much in tech and in Texas is actually it's cultural. That's what made Austin pop. It's cultural, that entrepreneurs look for completely different experiences where the arts, where film, where music, where video games, where these kind of cultural experiences are celebrated. Entrepreneurs seek those because it's evidence that you're a city, you're a town that likes risks, likes creativity, likes people who innovate and do new things. Houston's got a huge music scene, huge music scene. As an example of that, that's what's drawing a lot of people to Houston. Is there's this culture there that's incredibly appealing and incredibly attractive. Believe it or not, we're actually looking at whether or not Houston is in fact a better hub for music, tech. And I say that because I live in Austin, which is the live music capital of the world. But Houston might be a better hub for music tech than Austin because there's so much more of it in Houston, just given the sheer size of the city. We lean in on that culture, fuels the entrepreneurship, and that fuels innovation.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the music space per se, but now that you mention it, I can see some of the evidence of that in the past. Of course, there's some well-known people like Beyonce, et cetera, right?
Sure,
sure. But so it's pretty big in Houston.
It's a much more vibrant industry. It's better developed. It's well developed, and you're known for it to some extent. The blues scene there is well known in media.
That's true.
As one of the hubs, right? Chicago, St. Louis, Houston. And it's those characteristics, like I said, that people know about generally. And that gives them in their mind a reason to think Houston, got it. Or, and that's what drew people to Silicon Valley was, internet, Silicon Valley. Miami was the big hotspot for blockchain not too long ago and crypto before that went weird. But why? Because Miami's a great brand. It's a great town that people want to go visit. And so we lean in on what's powerful about Houston in our sector, whatever that might be, and we help that flourish.
Very interesting. Well, thanks for coming on and telling us about your perspective.
My pleasure. Good to see you.